What's up there, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin coming to you from the Big Blue Nation once again, and today I was going to talk to you about the prayer plant, or Maranta leuconeura. Now this plant got its common name, the prayer plant, because oftentimes at night, or more specifically in the dusk, these plants will respond and start to roll up their leaves. Kind of similar to how a young child would kind of fold his hands up and almost look like it was praying. So that's what gave the plant its common name. The plant is also really known for its fantastic foliage. I mean, they've got some red stripes, some red spots, some darker greenish kind of splotches on the leaves, some yellow stripes. I mean, they really are really beautiful foliage plants. So that's kind of what's really drawn most people to this specific plant, just because they really do kind of put on a beautiful display once they kind of spread out. Now they will have kind of smaller white or purple flowers that can be on canes, but those aren't really what they're known for. It's mostly just their foliage. Now these plants hail from kind of tropical South America, more specifically around Brazil. So these plants really do have to be grown indoors if you're going to grow them in the United States, because I believe they're really only hardy to the U.S. Department of Agricultural Zones 10 and 11. So if you're not in those two zones, you're kind of going to have to grow it inside for the winter time especially. These plants do not like cold weather, so they really wouldn't survive outside. What I'll do is I'll bring this guy in about early fall. If I set him outside at all, mostly he'll probably just be inside year-round. But if he starts to look a little sick, I can move him outside. And I will only do that kind of late spring to about summer and, like I said, early fall, because they don't like a lot of cold temperatures at all. And because these plants are cared for indoors, that's really why I'm drawn to them. And fortunately, caring for these plants inside your house is relatively easy. If you do prefer to build your own kind of substrate, one that I would recommend is one that's 2 parts peat moss, 1 part loam or perlite to about 1 part sand. If you're going to use sand, make sure it's builder sand. Again, because that's really finely washed, so it'll wash out a little bit of that silt that could potentially harm your plant. So that is one that's really good for drainage. Like I said, these plants are from a bit of a tropical area, so they do have a little bit of humidity and they do like their water, but they don't need to be standing in a lot of water, because these plants do have kind of fine roots and they will suffer from root rot fairly easily. Now I say that, and that's really one thing that's really kind of given anybody a lot of trouble with these plants is the humidity or the water with these guys. Like I said, they do like a bit of water. They do like a lot of humidity. I've heard people say these guys prefer about 100% humidity at times as well. Now, I've even heard some of my friends say that they are really susceptible to being in terrariums. They like a lot of kind of enclosure, one that would kind of hold in some water and be really, really moist for these guys. I've seen people put them in larger Ziploc plastic bags, but like a glass enclosure in a terrarium, maybe with some frogs or lizards or anything like that, would be really good for this plant. Other than that, I would probably give it a kind of a terrarium environment. Anything that, like I said, is kind of enclosed and maybe has glass with it, because that really will hold in a lot of water for these. Now, if you do go that route, typically with the larger ones, they don't need as much humidity. You can get away with spraying them. That's what I do with this guy. He does look like he would like a little bit more water. I just watered him today, but like I said, they do love their humidity. So if they don't get it, their leaf tips will start to kind of brown out a little bit. So they might make you work for it, but this is really the kind of only area that these plants are a bit of a diva. So yeah, if they are in an enclosed environment, they don't need as much water. You could probably get away with maybe 2 cups in a larger plastic bag or a terrarium. Just enough to kind of really let you kind of see that humidity, because then it'll really benefit the plant. But if you don't have it enclosed, you just kind of have it in a hanging basket like I do, they will tend to need more water, especially in the summertime or any time that's really kind of hot and humid out. These plants will need more water, so just definitely pay attention. Like I said, don't cause them to stand in water all the time, but you do want your soil to be fairly wet to the touch, not saturated, not soaked. But they do maybe be able to dry out once or twice in between, but I wouldn't let them go for long. Maybe a day of kind of a drier substrate, but after that I would give them some more water. And like I said, if you pay attention, you can kind of see when the leaves do get a little wrinkled or a little droopy, or you see a little bit of brown on them, you need to adjust accordingly. So if you do see a lot of brown, I would watch what kind of water you're giving these plants. They can be a little bit sensitive to it, so I use a filter with all my plants, but if you have hard water or softened water or anything other than rainwater outside, I would probably use bottled water just to be on the safer side. Now light, these guys do prefer bright indirect kind of light, so I would probably put them in maybe an east or west facing window. If it was going to be a southern facing window, it would be kind of back a little bit, because the direct light with these darker leaves can really scorch your leaves. So if you're taking this plant from a store or a grocery store, an area that does have windows, but these plants weren't really by the windows, you know, it's been a while since they've had some good light. So if you are going to introduce them into an area that is going to have somewhat of a brighter light, maybe for an hour or two a day, you want to kind of gradually introduce them to that. Maybe for about 30 minutes you'll let them sit in that kind of light area and then kind of move them back a little bit. Second day, go for about an hour or maybe 45 minutes. And then the third day, use your better judgment. Just remember, be patient, and the sun can hurt. So just be careful, because if they do burn these leaves or do anything kind of similar to that, that will be permanent. So it will be on the leaf kind of the rest of the grow time that leaf's been around. So just be courteous. Now temperatures. Don't forget, these plants are from a tropical area. So unless you live in that same kind of area or climate, I really wouldn't have these guys outside for too long of a time, especially in the winter time or in the late fall. I really would subject them to temperatures lower than about 50 or 55 degrees Fahrenheit, because any kind of exposure to that can do a lot of damage to the leaves and the tissues. I know they can probably experience temperatures of about 50 to below 50 for a day or two, but I really wouldn't tempt it. Now, obviously in nature, there are going to be periods of times where it is below freezing, but if this plant is to be subjected to that, it's only going to be for about a day or two in nature. Other than that, the plant probably won't make it. I know actually that if it does experience freezing temperatures, this plant probably will die. So just be careful. Now I know that there are certain circumstances, microclimates and what have you, that will actually be okay for this plant, but they do not like cold weather. So they do not like a drafty window or a cold drafty door, hallway. And they don't like to be next to air vents either, whether it's cold or hot, because when it is kind of hot, that will dry it out a lot, and like I said, they do like their humidity. So if they're kind of by a window or an air vent or a door, that can affect them, so just keep that in mind as well. Now size. These guys, they aren't too bad. I think they can have a spread on them of about a foot. Now, I've seen some that have been kind of bigger depending on location and light. They will thrive in kind of a brighter indirect light, and if you're feeding them every about 2 weeks in the growing season, these guys can have a nice spread on them. So they will kind of spread out some. They don't get too tall, maybe about half a foot or a foot or so. But they can spread out, so just be aware of that. Feeding with fertilizer, I suggest any kind of well-balanced fertilizer that's probably diluted to about a half ought to suffice for this plant. Now remember, they are foliage plants, so they do prefer a diet that is kind of high in nitrogen, because that will help them get the kind of nutrition they need to get them to focus on their leaves and their stems and all that. That really will help a foliage plant. So it'll bring more of the nutrients more towards the leaves, as opposed to kind of giving them something in the other direction that might help with their flowers. Like I said, these guys don't have a particularly showy spread of flowers, just some kind of smaller, less conspicuous ones. So this added nutrients for the leaves really just kind of will benefit it with the nitrogen. Pests, mealybugs. If you see any of these white, kind of cottonish, powdery kind of critters kind of walking around, you'll know mealybugs when you see them. They are white, they do kind of leave a powdery residue. These guys, and a nice organic way to deal with these, is just to kind of take some isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol, apply it to a washcloth, and just kind of go over any area that you see these mealybugs. Aphids are another one, just because these guys typically like to have more wet substrate, so you can kind of have an issue with fruit flies or fungus gnats, so kind of pay attention with that. If you do have a problem with any kind of soil pests or aphids or fungus gnats, the best thing I know what to do with this is get a product called Gnat Nix. It is kind of what you can see in these plants over here. It is a kind of superheated glass that has this consistency of sand. You put that over the soil about a ½ inch to an inch deep, and that'll prevent anything from actually crossing this barrier and getting into the soil. Now this particular substance is really ideal for whenever you're moving your stuff back in from the winter time. These plants have sat out there on your porch all spring and summer long. You don't know what's kind of gotten down into the soil. And then you got to bring these guys back in for around the fall and winter. It's really nice to have this kind of barrier over top of the soil, because anything that might hatch down in your soil won't be able to break through. This kind of sand consistency has super jagged edges, and that will puncture the skeleton of any kind of pest that maybe burrow down in there. So you will actually be able to kill anything without actually having to see it. I did want to say one more thing about the pests. If you see any kind of other pests that are kind of rampant, another good thing to do would be to take this guy and set it in your sink or your bathtub or outside in the summertime if the temperatures are okay, and kind of hose it down. In nature, these plants have Mother Nature that will come along and kind of hose them down and wash anything that's on them off. But unfortunately, indoors, we don't have that. So the best thing we can do is kind of provide that for these plants and hose them down to make sure anything that's kind of on there gets knocked off. And then your last resort would be to revert to something that would help chemical-wise, fungicide or an insecticide. I usually like to use insect soap just because neem oil is messy and it stinks to high heavens. But insecticide really does kind of help, insecticidal soap, without being too harmful to the environment. Obviously, you want to be careful whenever you're using it, not to use it outside, because you can kill any other beneficial bugs. So apply it somewhere that's not going to be able to spread anywhere and not hurt anything else in the environment. I like to do mine in the bathtub and spray it down after I've wiped it down, if I use any of the insecticide soap at all. So again, just be kind of conservative when you're applying that. And watch where you use it. Sometimes they have to be shaken really well before you apply it, and other times it has to make full contact with the insect before it actually works. Well guys, that's really all I wanted to say about the prayer plant. This is a beautiful foliage plant. They can get rather big, but not too big. So I do like these guys, and I've had a request for this video. So if you have any more questions, just leave a comment. Let me know if you've had any kind of success or failures with this plant and what you think about it. Like I said, I do like it a lot. This is the only prayer plant that I have. There are many different varieties, so take a picture of yours and let me see it. You guys have seen this one and let me know. Like I said, this will get bigger, so again, I will release an update video for it and show you all once the growing season hits and it has more room to spread out. Well, don't be shy, hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime that I've uploaded a new video. Well guys, have a good one, have a great life, and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.